They say there are a lot of things that go bump in the night, sometimes occasionally, in particular locations such as Montana. This next case is something that I've been working on kind of in the background for quite a while now. It's a very important one to me, especially right now, with certain trends that have been going on, certain ongoing events, characteristics that can be found in society too sometimes. This is a case happened in Montana. It's an official case. It's been around for quite a long time. The history of this person has been around as well. It's the case of John Michael Kreitz. And this one you're going to want to sit down for because it's quite interesting. And he has a lot of history behind him in Helena, Montana. Helena, Montana is where this takes place. So look forward to that. Also, it's kind of alluded to who actually did this. It's a man by the name of Leon Ford. You're definitely going to learn quite a few things about him. But John Kreitz, very interesting individual with a very, very interesting backstory. Look forward to this. Make sure to get this out there, continue to spread the word far and wide because, we need to put a spotlight on these cases. These cases are very important, especially to me. Thank you. So this part briefly discusses what they discovered at McDonald Pass. Nobody wants to be out there. And we're going to request, you make sure to get this video out there far and wide. Make this kind of mainstream. We want everybody to know about this. So in October of 2011, two Forest Service rangers made the discovery when they stumbled upon a garbage bag filled with dismembered human parts on McDonald Pass. The incomplete skeleton is identified as the remains of none other than John Michael Kreitz, the Helena, Montana man who had been missing for months after he went for a long walk in the woods.
Make the most of your holiday shopping with 1.5% cash back from
of John Mike Kreitz, a Helena man who had been missing for months. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, I want to tell you a little bit about who John Michael Kreitz was. I got a lot of my information from a blog written by his sister, Connie. Connie refers to her brother by his middle name, Mike, and writes that he was born in Wiesbaden, Germany. I hope I said that right. Wiesbaden, Germany on July 29th, 1962. He was raised as an Air Force brat before his family settled in Colorado in the mid-70s. Then in 1992, Mike moved to Helena, Montana. Here's an excerpt from Connie's blog as read by one of our co-workers.
Mike was taught by my father to love the outdoors, respect nature and wildlife, and to hone his hunting skills. After falling in love with Montana during several hunting trips, he worked hard, saved his money, and fulfilled his dream of purchasing his perfect piece of paradise just outside of Helena. This beautiful piece of land would have been paradise had people just obeyed no trespassing signs and respected the land as he did. Unfortunately, after a very long battle with trespassers, criminals, the county, and a few crazy people, Mike was murdered in paradise.
Connie goes on to say, Mike had one of those personalities that didn't allow him to bow down to people when they were wrong, simply for the sake of getting along.
He was more intelligent than most people, which sometimes made him seem arrogant, intolerant, and stubborn. Those things are true, however, he cared deeply about many things, including his family, his friends, nature, wildlife, and just doing things the right way.
Some people refer to him as Mountain Man Mike, and while he's often described as a bit of a loner, Connie says Mike checked in with family and friends quite often. On Monday, June 27th, 2011, one of Mike's friends and neighbors, Mark Flora, noticed two wolves on his property. One of them had his dog in its mouth and was starting to carry it away. As As Flora ran after the wolves, he noticed one was wearing a chain. It was then that he realized the wolves were actually Mike's hybrid wolf dogs that he kept as pets. In the court documents I was able to get my hands on, it says Flora told investigators in the 11 years they had lived next to each other, he had never before seen Mike's dogs come onto his property. Flora tried to call Mike several times but got no answer, so he decided to go to Mike's house just up the road to check on him. When he arrived, the door to Mike's home was wide open. All of his vehicles were there, and Flora noticed the gates to the dog's pen was also left open. Flora told investigators he had never known Mike to let his dogs roam free, and he hadn't heard of the dogs escaping their pen before. He felt it was strange, but left and decided to come back the next day. Then, with still no sign of Mike, he decided it was time to bring in law enforcement.
So, if I remember right, that Mr. Kreitz was reported missing, and we took the initial information, and I believe it was a couple of days that we began a quite a substantial search.
So, and we're going to interrupt this part right here because of how important this is to distinguish this fact. Mr. Kreitz, Mr. John Kreitz, did keep wolf dogs as pets. Like some temporary wolf dogs, depending on who you speak with, confirm the fact that John Kreitz kept the wolf as his official pet. And of course, this is important again because Brian O'Connor, during his time at NASA and also outside of NASA, was known to officially hunt with some of his colleagues wolves. So he would hunt the actual dogs. He would hunt wolf dogs. He would hunt just Alaskan style, collies. He would hunt these dogs, and he hunted something that would at least resemble a wolf a number of times near Yellowstone as well. So it's very interesting to make note of the fact that John Kreitz kept a couple of these animals with him at all times. Apparently he would go out on long hikes. They don't really go into detail about this here, but when he would go on those hikes, he would have each of his wolves right beside him. He called one like Lookout 1 and the other one Lookout 2. He had them for a reason. So that's why he would give them kind of his little nickname to his actual wolf dogs. But the reason that John Kreitz always kept the wolves with him is each one of these wolves was a very, very significant thing in the life of John Kreitz. This is what a lot of people are not aware of, but this is important, and so that's why we want to make sure to get this video, continue to get this video spread out there, and let's get this information out far and wide too.
It first runs through Dennis Shaw's property, then onto the Flores and Meehan's before it reaches Mike's place. Then on the other side of Mike's property is Leon Ford's land. Now, the whole argument is actually quite complicated, and it all had to do with who was allowed on what stretch of the road. Things escalated pretty quickly, and it wasn't just between Mike and Ford. In fact, Mike and Meehan had been in a dispute about the road for years before Ford even moved in. Court documents show Meehan was known to make threats against Mike and others regarding the road. Meehan was even arrested in November of 2010 for assault with a weapon after he was accused of pointing a rifle at Mike as he drove down the road on Meehan's property. This charge, however, was eventually dismissed with prejudice.
Pile snow in front of and blocking, etc.
Now on Connie's blog is a home video from Mike. It's seemingly showing him walking down the road and coming across a part of it that appears to have been purposefully blocked with snow, when suddenly a shot rings out.
Well, I'm hoping you guys just heard that shot. I just heard a bullet fly over my head. I see horses running there. So So we'll see if that's enough to make you law enforcement types do something. Hope you will. It's not getting any better up here.
Now, I don't know if this video is of the incident that Meehan was charged for or not. The video doesn't specifically name Meehan as the person who fired the shot, and you can't see anyone else in the video. But this video does go to show that tensions were high. So then back to this meeting that Mike was supposed to have with Ford before he was reported missing. Flora says Mike asked him to tag along, but Flora couldn't, and just told Mike to make sure to record the whole conversation. That was the last time Flora would ever speak to Mike. When investigators spoke to Ford, he told investigators he had actually spoken to Mike the night before he had made the call to Mark. He says he had requested Mike make sure a gate that they shared would be open when he made his trip to Montana from his home in Washington, but when he showed up, the gate was still locked. So he went to Mike's place and yelled for him to come out. He says Mike eventually answered the door while holding a pistol in his hand. Court documents showed several years before there had been a reported incident where both Ford and Mike were holding guns during an argument about the gate in question. No one was injured that time, but this could be why Mike would answer the door while holding a gun. Ford says the two men then pulled up buckets on the porch to sit on and spoke for a while. Ford said the conversation wasn't very productive and ended with him telling Mike that he was going to come back the next morning. That next day, Ford and his wife went up to their property and found the gate had been cut. He could hear Mike's dog howling from the property, but he never saw Mike himself. When they returned the following day, they could see the dog pen on Mike's property was open and his dogs were loose. While investigators continued to question neighbors and friends about Mike's disappearance, they pinged local cell towers to find out if there had been any activity on his phone. Now, records showed his phone had actually pinged at a cell tower on Wiley Drive and Canyon Ferry Drive the morning he was reported missing. Investigators also got access to the Flores game cameras they had posted along the road. This comes into play a bit later, so keep that in mind. Now, fast forward to October 5th, 2011. Two Forest Service employees were checking out a closed campground on the east side of McDonald Pass. While they were there, they began picking up beer cans. Near the fence line, they noticed a plastic garbage bag partially covered in dirt with a log on top of it. One of the Forest Service guys moved the bag with a stick, and it broke, revealing bones and decomp juices. Now, they weren't shocked to find a bag of bones. In fact, it's not unusual to come across bags with animal parts left behind by hunters. But then they noticed the zip ties. By the time law enforcement arrived, a second bag had been discovered nearby, about 50 feet away from the first bag. They noticed a long bone sticking out that pierced the plastic. Court documents say the ground surrounding the bag was soaked with fluids from decomposing remains. The contents of the bags were quickly determined to be human. However, it took until January of 2012 for the state crime lab to match the bones to a DNA sample taken from the sweatband on one of Mike's baseball caps. Court documents show markings on the bones led detectives to believe Mike's body had been dismembered with a saw. However, the bones did not make up an entire skeleton. It was then that this case went from the missing persons file to a homicide. Months later, detectives interviewed the Fords once again, this time at their home in Washington.
Now, of course, this confirms that they knew early on it was most likely going to end up being Leon Ford, because Meehan, he was a different issue altogether. Meehan didn't have like a long rifle, so to speak. He kept a kind of revolver style guns and similar, but he didn't really carry around a real long rifle, like a long rifle that you would see done by Smith & Wesson and so forth. So, of course, or even by Raymond. You know, there's a lot of different brands right now for the long rifles. But Leon Ford did have one. And he lived right there up the road, not too far, in none other than Washington State. And so there's going to be a part 2 on this for sure. But right about here is where I'm going to end this part 1. Make sure to spread the word, get the word out there. Get this out there for sure, far and wide. There's a lot that can be learned from this, and there's definitely quite a bit that's going to come out. So thank you. JTC channel. A brief history of John Kreitz. I won't say where some of this information or the podcast comes from. This is all true, though, and it's based upon a true story of what happened. This beautiful piece of land would have been paradise had people just obeyed no trespassing signs and respected it. Unfortunately, after one long battle with trespassers and criminals and a few crazies, Mike was murdered in paradise. A bit more about Mountain Man Mike. Mike had one of those personalities that did not allow him to bow down to others when they were wrong, simply for the sake of getting along. He could be a crusty mountain man, as one of his friends would describe. He was more intelligent than most people, which sometimes made him arrogant, intolerant, or otherwise. Those things might be true. However, he cared deeply about other key issues, including his friends, nature and wildlife, and doing things right. For example, he would never derive satisfaction from getting one of his many trophy animals in an illegal manner. Which, of course, we now know Brian O'Connor got all of his trophies illegally. That's right, go look up the history of what really happened in Grand Tetons National Park. Brian O'Connor, who was working at one point for NASA, would go out there and he would get plenty of trophies, but he'd do it illegally. The same way that Mike Van Jones got caught in Africa hunting more than 7 different types of whitetail, antelope, some deer, and even a mountain lion illegally. For example, he would never derive any satisfaction from these trophy animals. No one should be able to just hunt animals because they want to hunt them. I don't think that should probably be a thing. Although many people did not like Mike Kreitz for his attitude, he was brutally honest. He was always one to tell the truth. He never lied. His unfailing need to tell the truth is the reason that we now can firmly stand on what he told us while he was still with us. He did not fabricate nor embellish to make himself look better or make others look worse. He just told it like it was. That was John Michael Kreitz as a person. John Michael Kreitz was my little brother. He was 13 months younger than me at the time, and we shared the basement. His room was right next to mine growing up. He was a 70s lime green in the actual interior, and mine, where I stayed, was a 70s yellow as well. We spent many years listening to new music that he had discovered and played on his state-of-art stereo. We discussed with others what we would do with his boat. He absolutely was a jerk, as all brothers can be, but we had a bond. In 2006, I became deeply involved with the Mountain Man Mike Fish, Wildlife, and Parks nightmare and watched his personality then change. He was wronged at every turn and he became bitter. Then in 2008, someone moved down the hill and decided that Mike's land needed to belong to him. Add this trespassing and harassment on top of years spent fighting false hunting violations that he received at different places, and I grew to understand why Mountain Man Mike was murdered. There is much that happened prior to the day that Mike Kreitz went missing, but the chronology section of this site simply has the events from my perspective until August of 2011. I have many questions and could pontificate on many of the things mentioned, but will expand on those things separate in the interest of keeping this as concise as I can. Connie Kreitz. So, he was a legend in Montana. There was no reason to take down a legend. like Mountain Man Mike. So they had targeted him from the beginning. And that's also proof, of course, that Brian O'Connor was trying to get rid of Mountain Man Mike. Leon Ford was the one who actually killed him. And Leon Ford now has a form of dementia, apparently not able to remember every part of the incident. But clearly, they were not playing around with this. This was a very, very serious expedition. And Mike took his time when he was hunting game or when he was just in the outdoors. He took it very, very seriously. And so that's why he wasn't going to stop exposing the truth, of course. So continue getting this out there, continue spreading the word. There's definitely a lot that can be learned from this. A whole lot. Thank you. Man Mike. For the mountain man from Montana. John Michael Kreitz was remembered as a hero. The sister of John Kreitz, who disappeared in 2011, has also filed a new civil suit. Connie Kreitz filed a wrongful death claim against Leon Ford of Oak Harbor, Washington, and an unknown individual who shares responsibility. The lawsuit seeks recompense for damages at law, legal fees, and all appropriate relief as a result. Now, this is interesting because, see, Brian O'Connor, he worked at NASA for a long time, at the time that John Michael Kreitz apparently all of a sudden decided to go for a walk. And Brian O'Connor, Danny Brian O'Connor as he calls himself, I suppose, but Brian O'Connor, nonetheless, he went out there and he kind of pushed Leon Ford to find Mr. Kreitz. The lawsuit seeks recompense for all other damages. Kreitz was seen in June of 2011. In October of 2011, his dismembered remains are discovered in the plastic bag on the east side of McDonald's Path. His skull was found several miles west of the pass in September of 2012. The autopsy shows that Kreitz, who was 48, died from 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head. Now that's ironic because the way that John Kreitz was killed is not any different than the way that the hikers were killed in Moab and also in another area, Tooele County. Kreitz lived on a property along Turk Road in a rural area. He lived right outside Helena. Court documents confirmed there had been years of disputes between the two over the land and those who had access to it. A branch of Turk Road runs through Kreitz's property before leading to Ford's land. Kreitz had put up a gate across that road, claiming there was not a legal easement. The charging records state that investigators found new cables at both locations where Kreitz's remains were found. The ties were eventually identified as a specific type of cable, last produced in September of 2011. Authorities stated the manufacturer told them that the actual cords were only available from specific distributors and had to be special ordered to be used. Investigators also sought and found official records that came out of the Naval Air Station in Whidbey Island. Leon Ford was then arrested in August of 2020. He was charged with the homicide and also tampering of evidence in the death of John Michael Kreitz. A number of Leon Ford's accomplices, meaning the hunters that were working with Leon Ford, are still at large right now. I mean, we already know that Leon Ford was someone who supported Brian O'Connor. And knowing that fact has been well established, at least now through circumstantial evidence and confirmed on that, then we know that they were deliberate. They targeted John Kreitz deliberately, and then they got rid of him. And so obviously some of the people who originally worked with Leon Ford are right now at large as I speak. Make sure to keep getting this out there to the public, because the public needs to know the truth about what happened here. Thank you. So he had a lot of problems going into this. It states that in late May of 2011, John Michael Kreitz was sued by neighbor Dennis Shaw and John Meehan and Kate Wessel. Shaw, Meehan, and Wessel sought compensatory and punitive damages after Kreitz allegedly threatened or accosted the neighbors in town. On June 28th of 2011, Kreitz was reported missing. On October 8th, 2011, Kreitz's dismembered remains were found in black plastic trash bags in McDonald Pass. So their whole dispute was apparently over land of some kind. And interestingly enough, the others involved did get a probate request into the court, and they did take back that land. So it was done over a kind of land siphoning issue, so to speak. But there was more involved here than just, someone's estate in the case of John Kreitz. It also states that the county opposed the estate's request and argued that releasing CCJI to the estate compromises its investigation. In the response, the county submitted an affidavit from Detective O'Malley stating that the Kreitz homicide investigation is active. The affidavit further specifies the investigative file contains 95 reports that state Kreitz homicide investigation was active, totaling over 1,000 pages, at least 20 search warrants, thousands of phone records, multiple reports from Montana State Crime, and digital evidence that included audio recordings and photographs. On June 9th, 2018, the district court denied the estate's petition. The district court determined that 44/5-303 does not allow for the release of CCJI if the prosecutor determines dissemination will jeopardize an active investigation. Consequently, the district court declined to conduct an in-camera review. So they're talking about the Montana Criminal Justice Act in there. And that was one of the most interesting parts, because in reading the actual MCA, it says no person shall be deprived of the right to examine all public records and documents in the agency of state government except when the demanded individual privacy clearly exceeds the merits of disclosure. So they kind of go back on that, and they later claim that they erred in not providing the documents because someone else ended up suing them, I guess, in the case as well. But for the time being, we're not ever going to know what John Kreitz actually wrote underneath that brief, when they went back in to disseminate the actual review, because that was lost. That was apparently deleted or something, and John Michael Kreitz was, murdered, and all of the interesting information that's come out since in Montana. But everyone else, who was working on that case, did release a lot of the information that matters here, and showed that there was great error in judgment on the contract that the district court originally erred with, and it states in the Bozeman Chronicle for Montana, it had a disastrous effect on the actual property, the property owners in the area. So they ended up winning the case. I mean, the insurance providers actually did end up having to remove that contract clause. The insurance company were not held liable for any damages that Meehan and that they had actually incurred, and they had to pay it all basically in the end. But it was quite a shame that a number of victims in Montana lost their lives, as a result. It makes me, when I compare this side by side with the court documents in Moab and similar things, makes me really wonder about, Jean Paul Schulte, if something like that, if they're not desiring that same kind of outcome where they have to give up their contract to the land, and they give up, trying to seize that land or something. But Jean Paul Schulte is, no longer with us, or whatever the case may be. Certainly that would be one of the greatest outcomes for them, because in their mind, then they don't have to pay any kind of insurance settlement. Anyway, the interesting part is with Kreitz, it got a lot more people in Montana to look very, very seriously at the land division line, which is the dividing line where the land and estate meets, so that they can decide, on their own, where the land for their property begins and where the land for the, other state property ends. And that's a very, very important part of this. And again, I appreciate you continuing to get the word out, spread this far and wide. There's a lot more that need to weigh in right here, JTC channel. Thank you. Mountain Man Mike is very, very interesting and intriguing. It's the true story of John Michael Kreitz, and the story has recently been updated again. The Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office has announced a man has been arrested for the deliberate homicide in the 2011 death and demise of John Michael Kreitz. According to the press release, Leon Michael Ford was arrested in Oak Harbor. He was charged with deliberate homicide and tampering with evidence and desecration. In the release, Sheriff Leo Dutton stated that Ford is accused of purposefully and knowingly causing Michael Kreitz's death on or around June 26 of 2011 and distributing or disturbing John Michael Kreitz's body between June of 2011 and September 2012 in order to interfere. Dutton stated that Ford is to be arraigned in Oak Harbor later in August of 2022. Kreitz went missing in June of 2011. His dismembered remains were also discovered again near McDonald Pass in October of 2011. This is the first time someone was charged in connection with the death of John Kreitz. Now, this is very interesting because, it talks a lot about this on this podcast I was listening to very, very briefly to write my understanding of the situation. It's gratifying to my staff to know that the arrest was made this week. It is gratifying to know for the residents of Turk Row, as this has been a difficult challenge. Dutton stated that he had a unit of cold case investigators who worked on the case day and night, but he never considered them or the investigation to be cold. They put in a lot of time, effort, and gathered the evidence together. We kept on pushing it forward because we knew where the evidence led. There's been a lot of people, a lot of cooperation today. When asked if he expected any additional arrests, Dutton said, "Right now we are only focusing on Leon Ford." Now, this is interesting because Leon Ford, of course, was, in fact, a friend of Clark Jones. Yeah. But in reality, with Leon Ford, he was a close friend of Brian O'Connor. So that was the case of John Michael Kreitz. Very interesting individual, an interesting fellow overall. And there's more coming up now on Brian Laundrie. I'll just kind of allude to what's going to be happening with that, but burn after you read this. Will have a lot to do with what's coming up. So thank you again. Look forward to it. JTC channel. Until next time.